With Brock Lesnar retiring from the WWE at WrestleMania 42, or so it seems, now is a good time to look back on his career and legacy as a wrestler. First off, when I think of Brock Lesnar, he was a unique performer. Nobody was like him. There's no one who has the amount of accomplishments outside of wrestling that he does. Who else can say that they're both an NCAA Division I champion and a former UFC heavyweight champion? So he was legitimate, and that was the thing that stood out about him. He was not just legitimate, where yeah, he can kick your ass. A lot of wrestlers can kick your ass, but he was the real deal. I mean, like, no one really wanted to fuck with this guy. He had a presence to him that he was real. Yes, this is a show. He was a performer. He's an entertainer, but this guy was fucking real. And, like, you did not want to mess with him. And he has that type of aura that no one else really can have to that extent because of his accomplishments. But looking back at his career, it really began in 2002 when he debuted on Raw the night after WrestleMania 18. I remember it very vividly. There was a hardcore match, or there was some multi-man hardcore match, and he just comes out of nowhere with Paul Heyman, who was his manager. And Heyman, before that, he was with the Alliance. The Alliance lost at the WWF and the Invasion angle, and then he was off TV for a while. So he comes back a few months later now with Brock Lesnar, and Brock just murders everyone in this hardcore match. He's killing guys. He gives one guy a spine buster onto a trash can. He is just destroying everybody. And I was thinking, and I was a young kid. I was 6 years old or so. And I'm looking at him thinking, who is this guy? This guy is scary. He's huge. I was thinking he's like bigger than Goldberg was. And like, he is massive. He is just destroying everybody. And he had such a presence to him. Like, it was already, you can tell this guy is going right to the top. There's not going to be a slow build with this guy. He's going to the top, and that's what happened. He destroyed the Hardy Boys for a while, and he took that infamous chair shot from Jeff Hardy, which is still one of the worst chair shots of all time. It's like the top part of the chair, not the seat, the top part of the chair, hit him right in the fucking head, and Jeff swung really hard. It was brutal to watch. But he destroys the Hardy Boys at Backlash, and he teams with Heyman and beats them again at Judgment Day. Then he went on to win the King of the Ring, which caused Steve Austin to leave the company because he was supposed to face Steve Austin in the King of the Ring qualifying match on Raw. But then Austin didn't want to put him over just in such a meaningless match on Raw. So he eventually he walked out. And then Brock would still anyways win the King of the Ring. He beat Rob Van Dam in the finals. And then that gave him the opportunity to go to SummerSlam to challenge for the WWE Championship. And that's when he would face The Rock at SummerSlam in 2002, the greatest SummerSlam of all time still, by the way. And they built that match really well. It was like they built it up like it was a major boxing match because they would always show the two of them training. And it was such a great build. And it really felt like this was a major match. And that was incredible because Brock hadn't been with the company for a very long time. And they were promoting it like this was almost like a Rock Hogan type of deal, which felt like such a big match. And they set it up, SummerSlam. Brock, mentioning Hulk Hogan, he destroyed Hulk Hogan in the lead up to this match. He beat him up really bad, bloodied him up, and he beat him in a bear hug. I think it was on Raw or so, or on SmackDown, one of the two. Might have been SmackDown, and he destroys him, and it's leading up to this match with The Rock. And I can see what Vince, he wanted him to beat Austin and beat Hogan and beat Rock, and like now he's beating all the three major stars in the company within a couple months, and now he's the biggest star, and he's the new guy. He's the next big thing. And he would go on to defeat The Rock at SummerSlam. Really good match. He wins the undisputed WWE Championship. Fans were cheering for him because they were upset with The Rock because he was leaving for Hollywood at that time. So Brock got a lot of cheers from that crowd, even though he was the heel. And he won the championship, and they crowned him. And then after that, he went on to feud with The Undertaker for a couple of months. Had the match at Unforgiven wasn't very good, by the way. It just kind of got burned out. Then they had a really good Hell in a Cell match at No Mercy, an underrated Hell in a Cell match. I think it was better than their second Hell in a Cell match they had like 12 years later after that. But that Hell in a Cell, or 13 years later, that Hell in a Cell in 2002 was really, really good. And it was a bloody match. Undertaker was bleeding like crazy. Brock wins. He wins clean. He defeats The Undertaker. He wins Hell in a Cell. And then they had the feud with the Big Show at Survivor Series. That's when Paul Heyman turned on Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series. He aligns with the Big Show. Brock Lesnar loses his championship. Then he would cost the Big Show the championship the next month at Armageddon to Kurt Angle. Then in 2003, Brock Lesnar goes on to win the Royal Rumble. He wins the Rumble after he already won the King of the Ring just several months prior to that. And he wins the Rumble, and it sets up a match with Kurt Angle, who was the champion, who was the heel, and Brock was the face. And, WrestleMania 19, the main event, Kurt Angle defends the Undisputed WWE Championship. I don't know if it's still undisputed or just they were just calling it the WWE Championship, but whatever. He defends that championship against Brock Lesnar. WrestleMania 19, Brock Lesnar's first ever WrestleMania, just so happens to find himself in the main event, and in a main event match where he nearly killed himself. Brock does a shooting star press onto Kurt Angle, and Kurt was just too far away, and Brock is so big that he couldn't make it, so he hits the shooting star press, but he lands right on his head and a few inches away from Kurt, and it was one of the worst botches. Like, I thought the guy broke his neck, and it's fucking scary to look back on it because he's such a big guy. You just think about all that weight coming down on your neck, but then you think to yourself, well, his neck is so damn big that he can absorb his own weight. And he was like almost 300 pounds at that time. He was fucking massive. I think they would announce him as 295 pounds. So imagine all that body weight coming down on your neck, but your neck being so big that you can fucking absorb it. So that was still scary. And Kurt had his own neck issues, so you could have had like guys with two major neck issues in that match. And people thought Kurt might get hurt, but no, Brock was the one who who nearly got hurt. And Kurt was already had that neck injury. Anyway, Brock won. He hit him with the third F5, won the championship, and it capped off what is the greatest rookie year in the history of the WWE. The only ones that rival it are Kurt Angle's first year and AJ Styles' first year. But when you look at Brock, he won the King of the Ring and the Royal Rumble within a calendar year. He won the main event of SummerSlam and he won the main event of WrestleMania within a calendar year. He won the WWE Championship on both of those shows and both of the main events of the two biggest shows of the year. He wrestled numerous top stars, some of the biggest names in the history of the business, and he beat them all. He beat Hulk Hogan, and he beat The Rock within a few weeks of each other. He beat The Undertaker. He beat Kurt Angle in the main event of WrestleMania. The names are endless. It is an incredible year, an incredible debut, of course. And you can go on and on. I've never seen someone just shoot to the top that fast before. I don't think it's ever been done before, and it'll probably never be done before when you have someone debut, and within a few months, he's like the biggest star in the company, and he's pushed as the guy. And it's obvious everyone knows he's going to be the guy. And we assumed he would be the guy for several years. That did not happen, and we can talk about his second year in the company now, his sophomore year, which certainly wasn't a sophomore slump, still was very successful. He had a great feud with Kurt Angle in 2003, who I still consider to be Brock's greatest rival. I think they just had great chemistry together because of both of their wrestling histories. Brock being an NCAA Division I champion, Kurt Angle, of course, being an Olympic gold medalist, and they had a great feud. I really enjoyed it. They traded back and forth with the belts. Kurt won it back from Brock after he lost it to him at Mania, and then Brock beat Kurt in that incredible Iron Man match on SmackDown, which I would consider maybe to be Brock's best match ever still. That was just an all-time classic against Kurt Angle. He actually did lose to Kurt at the SummerSlam show before that, but then that match on SmackDown, it was something else. It's still my favorite Iron Man match of all time. And then I remember in 03 specifically when he literally murdered Zach Gowen. If you don't know who Zach Gowen was, he was a wrestler who had one of his legs amputated, and he wrestled briefly on SmackDown. He actually faced Vince McMahon on a pay-per-view match, and they were doing an angle for Brock to get heat, and they just had him throw him down the flight of stairs. It was so sick. He murdered that poor guy, and it was brutal to watch. There's numerous other moments that stick out to me. Also, I think that's when he met Sable, who became his wife. She was on SmackDown in 2003, so they met around that time. And he would go on later that year. He started the feud with Goldberg, and then what happened was that Survivor Series was their first encounter in 03. That was Goldberg and Brock's first encounter, and then later they would meet again at the Rumble, and Brock would he faced Bob Holly. He beat him early on the show. Then later that night at the Rumble, he would actually cost Goldberg the Rumble. He would interfere and attack him, and then he would be eliminated from the Rumble. I think he was eliminated by Kurt Angle, if I'm not mistaken. And then that would set up Goldberg to cost Brock Lesnar his WWE Championship at No Way Out in 2004 when Brock would face Eddie Guerrero. And look, as a kid, I didn't think Eddie Guerrero stood a chance in that match. I didn't think there was any chance. I thought Brock was just going to squash him. This was just a match. To me, I almost viewed it like I almost viewed Eddie Guerrero similarly to how I viewed Bob Holly. I just thought, it's another match for Brock before WrestleMania when he defends his title. No, Brock gets speared by Goldberg. Eddie Guerrero pins Brock Lesnar, wins the WWE Championship. An incredible moment for Eddie. And then Brock would go on to face Goldberg at WrestleMania 20 in what is still the worst match of his career. An absolute disaster, just an embarrassment. What happened was the fans all found out that Brock Lesnar was leaving WWE after WrestleMania 20 and he wanted to go pursue a career in the NFL, which just sounded so ridiculous to so many people. The idea of a guy who's never played football in college going to play in the NFL, it was just, it was preposterous. I found it laughable. And he went to try out for the Minnesota Vikings and he left WWE and they found out. So the fans, being who they are, were very upset with him. And then they also found out, I think it came out just the week before WrestleMania that year, that Goldberg was leaving as well. His contract, he had only signed for a year, I believe. So he was going to leave too. He was not staying. And the fans knew about it and they booed both of them out of the building. One of the worst WrestleMania moments of all time was WrestleMania 20. And it ends with both of them getting stunned by Steve Austin, who was the referee, who looked so miserable in the match. Brock was flipping off the fans, and it was just it was a disaster. And then he leaves the company, goes to the NFL. He almost makes the Minnesota Vikings, and I think he said he was the last player to get cut on that interview he did with Steve Austin back on the WWE Network a long time ago now. And he goes from there, and he wanted to go back to WWE at the time, but they wouldn't let him back in. They were very upset with him. They were furious, and then he actually had to sue them to get out of his deal because there was something where they said he couldn't wrestle for 10 years. Um, After they agreed to let him go, he couldn't wrestle for any other wrestling company. And then, he's an independent contractor. He challenged it in court. He won easily. He went to New Japan, was an IWGP champion, had a decent run there, but then he goes in to pursue a career in mixed martial arts. And I don't need to talk about his entire MMA career, but very successful. He won his first MMA fight and he got signed to the UFC. Lost his first UFC fight, but then he won his second UFC fight. Then he won the UFC championship, heavyweight championship, and had a good run there. He was champion for a while, and he actually main evented UFC 100 and retained his title. So he would eventually lose it, and he had that diverticulitis issue. Eventually, in 2012, he would return, and it was a great moment. It was the night after WrestleMania 28. John Cena had just lost to The Rock the night before, and he was basically waiting for The Rock. He was calling him out. Instead, Brock Lesnar comes out. An incredible return. Fans went nuts. I still remember it. I still remember being shocked seeing Brock Lesnar in WWE. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Brock freaking Lesnar. And I had known things had ended so badly with him with the company. I didn't think he would come back. And it was just an incredible moment. I remember he gives Cena the F5 and he kicks his hat away. It was really memorable. One of the best returns, maybe the best return in the history of the company. That's up there. It was really something else. And he was a name that you just didn't think would ever come back. And I guess kind of you can compare it to Punk in a way. That's it kind of predated that when he returned in 2023. The things got so bad with Brock, you weren't allowed to even mention his name. They wouldn't, whenever there was clips with guys who wrestled Brock, they wouldn't show Brock's face. They never mentioned him. They never mentioned him on their website. He was, in a way, he was almost persona non grata to the company for a while. So for him to come back, it was a shocking moment. And then that sets up his match with John Cena at Extreme Rules, which he loses. Yeah, I think WWE thought Brock might just quit, so that's why they had him lose to John. Yeah, Brock should have won. It was still a great match, by the way, on that show. It was a classic match. I remember, it was nothing I've ever seen before. It was very violent, but he loses, and then he goes on to have a year-long feud with Triple H. I did not like that feud at all. I thought it was pretty bad, to be honest. Dragged on way too long. Then he feuds with CM Punk, had a great match with him at SummerSlam in 2013. Then he feuds, he had, I think after that, I think there was a feud with The Big Show and Mark Henry, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Then, of course, it's the feud with The Undertaker, and it sets up the match at WrestleMania 30. Undertaker going into that match was 21-0 for his WrestleMania streak. He had never lost at WrestleMania. No one thought Brock would win. Brock was one of the least likely people thought would break a streak because he was a part timer. Everyone always assumed if the streak would ever end. I never thought the streak would end. No, most people thought the streak would never end. Undertaker would retire undefeated at WrestleMania. I think that's definitely what most of the fans wanted. But no one really thought Brock because he's a part timer. They're not going to give it to him. And he'd already lost to Triple H at WrestleMania last year at 29. And he'd lost to John Cena. And beating Brock wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't like he had never been beaten since he'd come back. He'd lost a lot of matches, so everyone just assumed Undertaker would win. He'll be 22-0, and no one thought Brock had any chance. And Brock goes in there, and they had Brock Lesnar pin the Undertaker 1-2-3 at WrestleMania 30, 21-1. Still, without question, the most shocking moment in the history of the WWE. And the most shocking moment in the history of wrestling to me. I was not expecting that. I could not believe the Undertaker streak just ended. I could not believe what I was seeing. I will never forget that moment. I was pissed off. I did not want to see that. And I was upset that they had Brock do it because he was a part-timer to me. So him beating the streak, wow, I was pissed. And no one could believe what was happening. The fans were shocked. We all remember the stunned face. Still, Brock he had the biggest win of his career that night. And it's without question the most shocking moment in the history of WWE and one of the most memorable moments in the history of WrestleMania. It has to be in the top three. Maybe only behind Hogan slamming Andre. That's how much of a shock that was to everyone. So that after he breaks his streak, he's the 1-21-1. Heyman brags about it, and both were so hated the night after WrestleMania. And then it sets up Brock, who he went away for a bit. Then he faces John Cena at the following SummerSlam, and another one of his most memorable matches was that match. And he just destroyed John Cena. John was the top star in the company. Brock demolished him for the entire match. He just killed him, German suplexed him a million times. F5, and it was shocking to a lot of people to see that. And then he was champ for a while. People thought he would go back to UFC in 2015, but decided to stay with WWE. He lost the belt at WrestleMania 31 when Seth Rollins cashed in, when Brock Lesnar faced Roman Reigns for the first time, the first of many times. Then I think he would feud with Taker again. Then he had that feud with Dean Ambrose, which was awful. The match at WrestleMania 32 sucked. And then he returned to UFC and he won. But then, there's a lot of controversy because that's when he failed his drug test. And he had that match with Randy Orton at that SummerSlam, which was just a disaster. He, elbowed him and Randy got cut open really bad. And I think Brock got into a fight with Chris Jericho backstage, and that sucked. Then there's the feud with Goldberg. He gets squashed at Survivor Series. And then it sets up a rematch with Goldberg at WrestleMania 33. Brock wins. He defeats Goldberg finally. He vanquishes his demon, and then it would set up the feud with Roman Reigns, and they had that disaster at WrestleMania 34. Brock actually won that match when everyone thought he would lose. He actually beat Roman at 34, and then he eventually would lose to him at that following SummerSlam. Then he won it back from Strowman when he beat Strowman to win the belt back, and then loses to Seth Rollins at 35, and he lost to Seth Rollins too many times in 2019, which I didn't agree with. And it didn't really help Rollins because the fans turned on him anyways. But then one of the most funny moments was later in 2019. I still find this match hilarious. One of my favorite Brock matches. It's just when he kills Kofi Kingston in 7 seconds, which I love because Kofi should have never been champion. He was really a joke champion. He was really bad as champion. And then Brock just squashed him on 7 seconds on the SmackDown debut on Fox. I laughed my ass off when that happened. Then he would lose to Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania 36. He lost the belt. And he also had that really great performance at the Rumble that year in 2020 when he eliminated half the guys before Drew took him out. Then he loses to Drew, and he's gone for a year and a half. And people thought Brock's done. He, it was during the pandemic era. No one really thought he would come back. Eventually, finally, he comes back in 2021 at SummerSlam attacking John Cena. And he has this long-term feud with Roman Reigns that just went on forever. He lost every match. He lost to Roman multiple times. Lost him at WrestleMania 38 for the unification match and lost. And they had he had this best match. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar had their best match, which was their final match at SummerSlam in 22. and that incredible last man standing match. Really, just something else that match was. And Roman won, and Brock would lose that match, and then he was kind of pushed down the card after that. It didn't really seem like he would go after the championship anymore after that. He had the feud with Bobby Lashley, then he feuded with Omos, beat him at WrestleMania 39. Then there was the feud with Cody Rhodes, in which he ultimately lost. He lost 2-1 in that match. Had a series of matches, lost at SummerSlam in 23, and then he puts his gloves down. People think, oh, that's it for Brock. He's done. He's gonna go. And I was there to watch it. I remember at SummerSlam 2023, he had a great match with Cody Rhodes. I really enjoyed it. It was the second match, and then Brock puts his gloves down. And I thought, oh, that's it for Brock Lesnar. He's done. That did not happen, and then there was definitely probably the worst part of his career, the controversy, and he was named in the lawsuit against Vince McMahon. He There's definitely a lot of things that was pretty disgusting with what he said. No defending it, and that's part of his legacy. That's definitely a stain on it. How much you want to judge him by it, he. I don't want to talk too much about it, but he did not have sexual intercourse with the woman or anything like that. But still, things he said were pretty bad, and that definitely damaged his image. And because he was named in the lawsuit, WWE didn't want to have much to do with him. They just had him sit at home for a year and a half, actually. And then finally, he was supposed to come back at the Rumble in 24, didn't do that, and then he was out until SummerSlam of 2025 when he makes his return. And once again, he attacks John Cena. Every time Brock Lesnar comes back to the company, he just has to attack John Cena. After John Cena loses to Cody Rhodes, he gets attacked by Brock Lesnar. And then they have another match at WrestlePalooza. Brock destroys John Cena in the opening match. And then he realigns with Paul Heyman. He then would lose to. He was around for a while. He didn't do much in the Rumble this year, but then he eventually would lose to Obafemi at this year's WrestleMania. The opening match was the best boat match on the entire show. And they did a really good job of building it up. Brock Lesnar lost. It was a typical Brock Lesnar sprint match, I think under 5 minutes, but he lost the match. And after the match, Brock Lesnar sits up in the ring, is very emotional. You just don't expect to see Brock being emotional. He's just never been that guy. You just always assumed to him I always thought he was very stoic. I didn't think he was capable of emotion, but he's emotional. He takes his gloves off. He takes his unties his wrestling boots, puts them in the middle of the ring, just like John Cena did a few months ago. And he puts them in, and fans know exactly what's happening. He's emotional. Paul Heyman is very emotional. He was crying. Brock and Paul Heyman embrace in the ring. They get a standing ovation. Thank you, Brock chants. Then Brock walks up the ramp with Heyman, who again was very emotional. Brock waves to the crowd. Thank you, Lesnar chants. And that was it. He retired at WrestleMania 42. It was a shocking moment. No one expected him to retire. People thought he would retire this year, most likely at SummerSlam, but he decided to retire at WrestleMania, and that was it for the Beast. And that was the last time we saw him at WrestleMania. And look, is there a chance he wrestles at SummerSlam? Here's the thing. SummerSlam this year is in Minneapolis. If it was anywhere else, I really wouldn't think there's much of a shot, but because it's Minneapolis, Minnesota, they might have trouble selling some tickets. It's possible. They did have trouble selling tickets for WrestleMania this year. It's possible because they have trouble. They want to bring Brock back. And, Brock Lesnar promoting it as his final match in Minnesota at SummerSlam, that's a huge attraction for SummerSlam. It's a big attraction, and it will move tickets. Brock Lesnar's name, his retirement in Minnesota, where he's from, his whole career is announced he's from Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where he's retiring. That's going to move tickets. I just have trouble believing he's not going to be part of the show. And it's shocking to me for Brock not to be on that show. I find it shocking. So, look, there's certainly a chance he's going to come back. I hope not. I think this was actually a good send-off for him at WrestleMania. And because it's Mania, more people see. I think it helps Obafemi a lot more. Because if he just comes back and, say, the favorite Gunther wants from Paul Heyman is to retire Brock Lesnar in Minnesota, and Gunther retires Brock. I don't think Gunther really needs it because he's already retired John Cena. He's retired AJ Styles. He's retired Bill Goldberg. I don't know if he really needs to retire Brock Lesnar as well. He's already has the moniker of the career killer. So, and I think it hurts Obafemi in a way because now he didn't really retire Brock Lesnar. Gunther did again. So, and I don't think it really. I just think it's better for it helps Oba Morris, and I don't think he should come back, but there's definitely a chance that they will. So we'll see. Look, it's shocking for Brock to retire within a calendar year of Goldberg retiring first in July, one of Brock's greatest rivals, and then John Cena retiring in December. Brock was in OVW with John Cena. They both debuted in 2002 within a few months of each other. Brock debuting in March of 2002, John Cena debuting in July of 2002, and both retiring within a few months of each other as well. And then also AJ Styles retiring at the Royal Rumble this year. So AJ was definitely he came in. He really made his name in TNA in '02 or so. That's when Brock came in, and that's when John Cena came in into WWE. So like all three of them retiring within a few months of each other. That's definitely significant. And you can also go to Hiroshi Tanahashi retiring in New Japan. He was the face of New Japan, and it's you have all these major names retiring. So it's definitely very significant. And you don't expect so many names to retire within such a short span of each other. But Brock's retirement, man, it was definitely something else because you never saw him have any emotion. And going from his career, let's talk about his legacy. And how Heyman described him on the Raw after Mania is perfectly accurate. I think he called him like the baddest motherfucker in the history of professional wrestling. He had to censor himself. The guy was a freak, a physical specimen. Still is in his last match. Still in great shape. But when he first came in, it was like, what the fuck? That guy is like, he's gonna be something. Like you don't see people built like that. And he was legitimate the toughest guy in wrestling. I mean, he's a freaking UFC heavyweight champion, a former one. Like it's like there's no one else that can really kick his ass. He was legitimate, and that's the thing he had. And it wasn't just the UFC career. It's like when he came in, he had such a presence to him, and because he was a great amateur wrestler already, you knew like this guy was legitimate. That's something that not too many people have. He has legitimacy, and no one would beat him in a fight in wrestling. So I also would say, central to his legacy is Paul Heyman. I think it's the greatest wrestler manager duo in modern history. I don't think we've seen anything like it recently, maybe ever. I mean, Paul Heyman managing Brock Lesnar, it's perfect. It was a perfect match. It was great for Brock. Brock definitely needed Paul Heyman because he's not a very charismatic guy, never been a great promo. Heyman was perfect to represent the beast, Brock Lesnar, who was the 1-21-1. That is Brock Lesnar. That's definitely the most famous Brock Lesnar match ever, breaking the Undertaker streak at WrestleMania 30. So, a once in history type of wrestler. You don't see anyone like Brock Lesnar. He's so different from anyone else. It's impossible for there to ever be another Brock Lesnar because of his accomplishments and his credentials, and the way he looks and the way he moves. The guy was such a freak. When he was younger, especially, like the way he would move in the ring, like you wouldn't see it. The guy was a freak fucking athlete. There's a story that he once sprinted had to sprint against Shelton Benjamin and almost won, or he might have won. I don't know, but just an all-round athlete. The guy was a beast. He still is a beast. Brock Lesnar is a beast. All-time great in WWE, and definitely not. You won't see many. You will never see anyone like him again. That's his legacy. Heyman, I think, called him like once, not just once in generational, once in history. That's what Brock Lesnar is. He's once in history. The man was a beast. No other word to put it. He is the beast. Still is. Not was, actually. He still is the beast. And all-time great talent. And definitely unique. And you won't see anyone else like him ever again.